So what we can do is we can open up Lex here, and we can open up Amazon Lex. And before we can use Lex, we can see currently Lex is supported in North Virginia, in Oregon, Sydney, and Ireland region. So these are the regions that are currently supported. It is not available in all the regions here, right? And Lex is a paid service, guys. We do not get any of the services free of cost. It is a paid service. And Amit, so again, currently it is being available only for selective regions here, right? So now what we can do is, now here we can see the list of, when we are in the Amazon Lex dashboard, we can see the list of all the previous Lex that we have created. Now, in order to create a new Lex, a new chatbot, we can click on create. And now we have two options available. Either we can go ahead and create our custom bot, or we can go ahead and use a template through which we can get started. For example, if you want to start from scratch, we can click on custom bot. We can define each and every parameter. Or if we want to use a sample, for example, let's say we want to use a template for booking a trip. We want to use a template for order flowers. We want to schedule an appointment. So depending upon a requirement, we can use a template, which obviously we can customize, step by step. Now, once we have configured these, now for example, let's suppose we want to start with order flowers. We can simply choose order flowers, or if you want to start with a custom board, we can click on custom board. So let's say we start with a custom board here. We can define the bot name. We can define the bot name here. Let's suppose we define the bot name as order flowers. Let's say we start with a simple bot by the name of order flowers. We are trying to order flowers by using, the main purpose of creating this chatbot is we want to order flowers. That's a main purpose. There's a main reason why we are creating this entire chatbot, to order flowers here. Now, once we have defined the name, then we can choose the output voice. If we are trying to use the voice-based system as well, then we can choose the output voice. Now, I'm sure that you will not be able to hear the voice here, but again, here we are, just like if we have been using Siri, right? If we have been using Google Assistant, we can customize the voice, right? So there are some pre-configured voice templates available, so we can choose which voice we want to use for our system. So for example, let's say we want to choose Salil, Joanna, Matthew, Ivy, we can choose it accordingly. Here, right? So for example, we want to use the voice of Sally. So as again, once we choose Sally here, we'll be here a small voice sample of Sally. If we choose Joanna, like Juana, so Joanna, Matthew, Ivy, Justin, Kendra. So for example, let's say if we are trying to create a chatbot, for example, let's say we are creating a chatbot for any toy store, or we can use this child voice by the name of Ivy. So depending, because again, we have to customize the entire solution. If we are creating we can say a kid store, a toy store, then obviously we don't want to use a grown-up voice. Then we can use the voice for a kid altogether. Correct? So depending upon the requirement, we can define that. Now here we can choose, for example, let's suppose we are trying to use Sally. We can use a voice for Sally itself. We can use a voice for Sally. And then we can choose, okay, what kind of configuration we want to use here. Suppose if we want to hear a sample voice, then we can, okay, let's say here we want to type in, we want to hear. So whatever we want to hear as a sample, we can type in welcome to Lex. Welcome to AWS Lex service. Or let's suppose welcome to Enrica. So now if you click on play here now, so whatever we type in here, this will be played back in the voice that we have currently selected. And then we can define the session timeout. That means again, now we must have seen that if we are on any particular domain here, as you can see here, So currently, since we did not respond for a couple of minutes, now the entire session has been signed out, correct? As you can see here, since we did not respond for 5 minutes, the entire session has been signed out. So here we can define the session timeout, the session timeout duration as well. For example, we want to keep the session open for, let's suppose, 10 minutes. We can define 10 minutes to be our session timeout duration here, right? And then we can choose a service for, okay, for sentiment analysis. If we want to use this for our machine learning purposes, that means in which context and what is the user sentiment in which they are given the command, then we can keep it to yes or no. All right. So if you want to enable this, we can keep it to yes, for which we can configure this at a later stage, or we can, by default, we can keep it to no. So in this entire hands-on, we'll try to keep it for no as of now. Then we have to define a role. So role is basically, let's say, roles are basically the permission that we grant for one service to the other. For example, if we are trying, suppose if we are trying to save the records for Lex service into our S3 bucket, right? So roles are basically like the permission. So if one service wants to communicate with the other service, for example, here, if Lex wants to show something in S3, then we have to give a role, that we have to create a role giving the complete write access to S3. Then only Lex will be allowed to make some changes or communicate to S3 itself. And that exactly is why we have roles assigned. So when we are creating a custom bot here, then the rules are already pre-configured so that we can use this role without having the need to go ahead and create a custom rule for us. And then we can choose the COPA. So basically it's like a child protection here. So basically here we have to make sure that our entire bot is comparing to the rules and regulation defined in Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. That means we don't have to, we won't be asking any kind of private information, especially from children, as a part of the regulations. And this is an important regulation, especially for the European market. So we have to take care that we are taking care of these kind of parameters. So as a part of our hands-on, since we are not going to deploy this on any of the markets, we can keep it to no for now. All right. And then we can click on create. And then once we have defined that, we can click on create. So this will create one sample chatbot for us. Okay, order flowers already exist. Let's say here we will do one thing. Let's delete the previous bot so that we can use the current one. Let's go ahead and let's do one thing. Let's create another bot by the name of order flowers 2. Here we can choose output voice as Sally. We can define the session to be 10 minutes. We can keep the sentiment analysis to be to no and no for sentiment analysis. And then we can click on create. Now, once we define the entire bot, then we have to start customizing it. We have to start customizing it based on the intent as well. Based on the intent, we have to customize that particular parameter. All right. And here we can click on create intent. First of all, as you can see here are the components of a bot here. Here we have to define intent, and then we have to define the different utterances, and then whatever response is being sent back from the user, then we have to define the slots for it, right? And by the end, we have to define the business logic required to fulfill the user intent as a part of fulfillment. All right. So first of all, once we have the bot created, then we have to click on create intent. And now we can choose, if we already have the intent created, then we can import it, or we can say if we can import the previous trend, or if we want to create a new intent now, we can click on create intent, or if we want to use any of the previous intent. For example, suppose if we are building any particular template, if you want to use any of the templates, for example, let's say we want to import the intent for booking a ticket or ordering flour, ordering food, then we can go ahead and use it, right? So what we can do is, for example, if you want to start from scratch, we can click on create intent. We can define the intent name. For example, let's suppose we are creating the intent for flowers, or not the have flowers order. or order flower. We can click on add. So as you can see, order flower has been created. Order flowers has been currently created. And now if we want to go ahead and start using it, now what we can do is, first of all, we have to create the intent first, right? So for example, suppose first of all, here we have to define the utterance. Utterance as in the initiator. We can say the conversation initiator. That is something that we have to define here. For example, let's say if a customer types in as, I would like to order flowers. So when the chatbot opens up, now we can define when the chatbot opens up, we can define, okay, how exactly we want the conversation to start. For example, let's suppose here we did start with let's go. So same way we can start the conversation with I would like to order flowers, I would like to book tickets, I would like to order pizza. So depending upon the intent depending upon how the conversation needs to be started, we can define the utterances. We can define the utterances based on the requirement here. All right. And then we can open now. Here we can come back. So here we can see here we have the entire intent being defined. Then we can define these slots. Then we can define slots here. Now, once the entire number, once the utterance has been added here. Now, if you want to add more sample utterances, then we can also add that. Next is we have to define the entire slots altogether. Then we have to define the entire slots altogether. Like what exactly that we are trying to take the input from the users. For example, let's say here we are trying to take the input as flower type. That means we now, once they type in as, okay, they ask us, okay, they like to order flowers, right? Then first of all, we'll be asking them what kind of flowers. They want to order lilies, they want to order real roses, they want to order orchids, they like what kind of flowers they are looking for. So here we can define the slot type. Now they are predefined slot types available. They are predefined slot types available. For example, let's suppose if we are building, if we have been working, if we have been building a slot for food, then we could have search for food. For example, suppose if this was something for food establishment, or have a custom slot created, and that is what we have as a flower type, as a part of the entire slot type as a flower types. Now here we can ask a question. Now what question would be asked, so that whatever the user answers for this question, it will be saved as a flower type, correct? So here we can add, okay, as we are trying to ask here. And now we can click on save intent. Now we can in, we want this to be referred as a location, correct? So here we can define the address type here. That means they are going to enter, for example, suppose here we can ask them location as in city. For example, suppose we want to save them as a part of city itself, right? So here we can ask, okay, which city? So okay, we already have for Amazon AD city itself. Now, here since we know that it is currently available only in selective regions, that means again here it only has the list of cities for Atlanta, for Europe, for Britain, and for US city. So currently, if we are building this for North Virginia region, then we can choose US city. So this for whatever the response of the users will be, it will be saved under city itself. For example, here we define as we are going to be recorded as a city intent, right? And we are going to look at that part, guys, how to create the custom slot type. We are going to discuss that part step by step. First of all, let's discuss, going to discuss that part step by step after we are done with this parameter. All right. And so then we can search for the, now in the slot type here, we can search for the slot type as the date itself. That means now here we want to, as in at what time we want to record this, at what time we want the flowers to be delivered, we can simply search for time as well. So whatever the user responds, the entire what time. That means now we are asking the users. We are asking the users what is the type of flower they would like to order, in which city, on which date, and at what time. And now if you want to make any of these parameters mandatory, because without that, we will not accept the order, that we can make it mandatory. For example, for ordering, we need to know in which city, we need to know on which date and on which time, right? So suppose if we don't need a time here, then we can define, okay, how exactly, if you give this, all right, or suppose to keep things simple. And then if you want to add multiple responses here, so for example, let's say, thank you, your order has been placed. For example, you want to showcase a simple message as thank you. For example, your order for lilies. For example, your order for here we can define the flower type here. Here we can, if you want, we can define the entire type as well. Here we can define type here. For example, suppose here we define the intent as flower type, right? So here we want to show your order for flower type. That means this entire content for flower type will be automatically replaced with whatever flower they have ordered. So this is a custom response that we can greet the users, that we can show the users once they are done placing the order. All right. And then we can simply scroll down, and here we want to enable the response card, or we want the user for reply here. Then we can wait, or we can simply enable the response card. Now, once we are done defining the slots, once we are done defining the entire user sample utterances, then we can have to scroll down, and here we have to click on save intent. So as you can see, our intent has been currently saved successfully. And now if we want to test it out, if you want to test this, we can click on build on top. So if we want to test the performance of the bot that based on the utterances that we have currently defined here. Whatever we have defined here, it will be simply created. Now we may have to wait for a couple of seconds for the entire build to happen. Yes, whether it is working or not, we can simply go ahead and test the bot here. That means, for example, now initially is since we have also selected the voice-based input. That means either we can type in or either we can speak up as well, right? So for example, first of all, let's try with the text-based command, and then we'll try with the voice-based command. For example, suppose if we type in as, now, even though we have defined the utterance, even though we have defined for the utterance as order flower, I would like to order flowers. We can simply type in as order flowers, order flowers. So again, as you can see, now this entire utterance does not match fully to what we have defined here. So here we can start fresh. So for example, here we will define order flowers. So now it is going to ask us what kind of flowers we are trying to add here. For example, let's suppose we define as lilies. We want to order lilies. Then again, the next part was which city. So now part, correct? So as you can see here, now this is order for, so whatever the user entered for lilies, that has been recorded, and that the same is going to go for voice based. Now we can speak up as well. For example, for speaking up, we can enable this mic. I would like to order flowers. It will process the audio input. Which city? New York. As you can see here, it successfully interpreted what we had spoken up, right? And then what date? 15th April at 9 p.m. Now, as you can see, it failed to validate. As you can see, it was asking for a date here, but again, it failed to interpret. Okay, yeah, fine, thank you, right? So, for example, if we give the voice input again here,